What am I going to do this morning?
Howdy folks, it's Nito with AP2020 Outdoors. Welcome to the AP2020 Outdoors Outdoor Shooting Range. Yes sirree, this is my private shooting range. You can't get any more remote than this. I don't think there's any humans for several miles. Howdy folks, it's Nito with AP2020 Outdoors. Welcome to AP2020 Outdoors podcast. This is season 1, episode 2. I have a special guest, Tyler Patner with Pyramyd Air. Tyler, how you doing this morning?
Great, Nito. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, folks, on my channel, I used to do some content on air rifles and air guns. I had some PCPs probably about 8 or 10 years ago, and I just kind of stopped doing content specifically because I had issues of getting air of all things. I think I had a couple Umarex gauntlets, and I had the bicycle pump, and I'm 140 pounds dripping wet. And when I got to about the 70 or 80th stroke, I was literally having to put my full weight to get the tanks filled up. And then I live in Ohio, and I'm about probably an hour west of Newark, and that's our closest scuba shop. And I've got a couple older Ninja 4500 PSI carbon fiber tanks, and I used to get filled, but it was just unsustainable having to drive 2 hours round trip to get a couple tanks filled. So anyways, that's where I'm at. Tyler, how about yourself? What's your background as far as getting into air guns and air rifles?
Sure, yeah. So I got into air guns pretty organically, I guess, like through YouTube, like everybody else, right? About 12 years ago now. So I was just coming out of high school, starting college, and I wanted to learn to shoot. Didn't really have an opportunity. I grew up in the Chicago area, so like shooting, like from a sports standpoint, was not really a thing, right? So I got onto YouTube one day and stumbled onto some airgun videos, and I was like, I could do this in the backyard. Check that out, right? Went to Walmart, bought an airgun, and was just like hooked, and I went through college. I shot like a little bit competitively. Our school had a club team for like 10-meter rifle and pistol. And from there, I got into field target competition, which I went to school in Kentucky. So I drove down to Tennessee to shoot because that's where like the nearest club was. And that's more like, for anybody that's not familiar with field target shooting, that would be like 3D archery, but with an air gun is the like kind of closest thing I can relate it to. It's a lot of fun. But then when I got out of college, like a lot of kids, I was wondering what I was going to do with my life, and said, I like this air rifle thing. Let me see what companies in the industry that are in the US are hiring. So I stumbled on Pyramyd Air 10 years ago, 10 years and 6 months roughly. And I've been there ever since. So that's kind of been my journey. And I started there as a salesperson and kind of worked my way through, got to kind of create my own job into what it is now as a product manager. So I basically manage everything that goes onto our website, get to test a lot of guns. I do like video reviews, all sorts of different stuff. So it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah. So a little bit further on my background. So believe it or not, I grew up in the 70s, and just like any, small town kid, I grew up with everybody had a Daisy BB gun.
Sure.
And, it's kind of funny back in the day, back in the 70s, Daisy used to hold these contests every year, and it was a national contest. They also had the state, regional, local contest, and they were actually held in a J.C. Penney's, which I don't think there's any J.C. Penney stores anymore. But where I grew up in Marion, it was probably a small town of probably about 40,000 people, and for I think from age 6 to age 12, I dominated that.
Nice.
It was 5 shots at 15 feet with the old Daisy Model 99 target rifle. It actually had peep sights with interchangeable front posts. You could change the quote reticle, and it was 5 shots at 15 feet. And I think, like I said, the first place was a winner was a new Daisy Target 99 rifle. And like I said, I won that 6 years straight running. So that was my background, my very first taste of BB guns. And then moving into just into more quote higher power. Tyler, I don't know if you ever Google search a Crosman Model 760 Pump Master.
I had one.
You had one. Awesome. So back in the day in the 70s, they had a wood forearm,
Yep.
And after about maybe, I don't know how many shots it was, my buddy and I, we'd have to keep a can of WD-40 with us because the felt seal would start drying up
Yep.
and wearing out. And we'd spray the cylinder with WD-40 to maintain that seal. So
well, the WD-40 part's not really advised these days,
yeah.
but you got to do what you got to do.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's funny actually. Daisy still runs that competition at a national level. So
oh, no kidding.
they still do the national BB gun competition every year. It's down in Arkansas near their headquarters, I believe.
Awesome.
And yeah, I mean, they get thousands of kids out there. It's crazy. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. That's wild.
Yep.
So anyway, yeah, that's kind of good back to see where, where we're at now. I mean, compared to what, back then as a kid, I always wanted, like, I think I did have a BSA break open 22 pellet rifle.
Okay.
The British.
Like a super sport or something?
Yeah. And that was my go-to. I hunted many blackbirds and starlings and,
Sure.
During small game season, shot a couple rabbits and squirrels. But, I, like you, I grew up shooting powder burners as well, but I was in a neighborhood to where you couldn't shoot, a powder burner. Yeah. So anyways, okay, enough about us. So tell me a little bit about, for folks that don't know about Pyramyd Air or I'll put all the links in the video description, obviously, but tell me a little bit about Pyramyd Air. You guys have grown so much in the last, like you said, probably 10 years. It's just amazing how much you guys are offering now.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. When I came into the company in 2013, we had like 40 people total, and now we have roughly 100, right around there.
Wow.
So it's grown pretty considerably. The company was started in our founder Josh Unger's basement or garage, basically, back in the mid 90s. So the company's been around for over 25 years and has grown kind of with the internet, obviously, as the world's largest online airgun retailer. A couple of years ago, we kind of pivoted to not just selling air guns. Obviously, now we sell archery products, like you name it. If it's outdoors, the plan is we're gonna list it. But we really found that you look at the way Amazon's going, right? Like cutting off some shooting related stuff, and Walmart. You read articles about them pulling guns off shelves and stuff like that. We kind of see the writing on the wall that there's not a lot of online safe havens for outdoor related products at this point. You have some big retailers out there, but there aren't a ton of them. So that's really where we want to focus, right? And maintaining, like I said, kind of a safe space, if you will, for anything shooting related, outdoor related, whether it's hunting gear, like we sell tethered products. So like tree saddles and platforms and all that stuff. If you want to get up in a tree and hunt, we sell bows, crossbows, e-bikes, like anything that's kind of related to, getting out into the woods, going hunting, exploring nature. We're all about it, but very much still, obviously, the world's largest airgun retailer, first and foremost. And yeah, that's really where our bread and butter is, but we're getting into other stuff, which is cool.
Awesome. So kind of segueing back to my story about, having to bicycle pump the PCP, which is pre-charged pneumatic. Yep. Like I said, I kind of fell out of touch with PCPs. Sure. And then just in the last, I don't know, probably the last 5 years, that stumbling block was actually getting the air. And now the HPA, high pressure air compressors, the technology has just blossomed in my estimation. If you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So in 2017, Air Venturi released kind of the first US backed, if you will, like you could find this stuff on Amazon sometimes or eBay, right? But it was like you were getting it shipped from China with no backing, no support. Like if it broke, you were SOL, right? But the cool thing is, so Air Venturi brought out a big personal compressor. So a compressor that would be used to fill your tanks, right? The Ninja tanks you referenced. And that was like at the time, I think $1,200 or $1,300. I believe the price has gone up a little bit now, into the 14, 15 range, if memory serves. But about 6 months after that, they came out with what they called the Nomad compressor, which was their first kind of portable compressor, if you will. And that thing you plug into a wall outlet or a 12-volt battery, you hook it up to a 12-volt battery. and you can fill your guns in minutes. And so they've expanded that line. A bunch of other companies have come to the table, but that's really made not only hand pumps, but also to some extent carbon tanks, right? The big carbon tanks, somewhat, irrelevant's not the right word, but we definitely see more people going towards the compressor route than we do the tanks and the pumps route. And that's because it's, in theory, if you maintain it, you know, and you have some capabilities of rebuilding it, it's going to last forever. You're always going to have it, right? Where, you know, a carbon tank has a lifespan of 15 years from the date it's made. And a hand pump, well, to your earlier point, it requires you to be physically stout to operate. I have the same problem as you did, by the way. When I got my first PCP, I bought a Benjamin Discovery, which was only
I've got one still.
Yeah. It was a 2000 PSI, not so bad with the hand pump. But the minute I got my first 3000 PSI gun, I'm jumping on the pump to get it down. You know? And so that was less than ideal. And I bought a tank right away. But I still have tanks, but definitely the personal compressor side has really taken over. You can buy a pretty good quality personal compressor for $500 now. They started at like $8 and they've come down significantly as you know, technology's changed. Like it's the same thing you see with computers or any technology, really, you know, where you give it some time and the prices come down, the quality gets better. So there's no reason not to get into pre-charged pneumatics now. And that's really where the big growth in the industry is. You've got big bore air guns that are more powerful than they've ever been for hunting big game. You've got more, like your Gauntlet was a pretty revolutionary rifle at the time, being a $300 regulated PCP. Well, now you have guns like the Air Venturi Avenger that is a $350 regulated PCP, but it's all adjustable. So it's got an adjustable regulator. You can set the power to do what you want to do with it versus being stuck with the settings it comes out of the box at, basically. So you've got a lot of different stuff out there, and there's so many more manufacturers that are coming into the fold on the PCP side than anywhere else, which is also kind of telling, right? That's where the most ground to gain is, I guess, if you were to look at it that way.
Right. You know, the thing that really struck me as amazing, I'm an electrical engineer by trade, so I understand some of the physics involved in PCPs, but really always blew my mind was the consistency. Even, you know, even the Benjamin Discos, you know, we used to call them disco, right?
Yep.
And I did a video on my YouTube channel probably 10 years ago, and I was shooting in my backyard at 70 yards. But this was before they actually had decent scope cams, so to speak.
Yeah.
I actually rigged up like an old Sanyo it was a mini DV, right? Okay. Like this is a 12, 15-year-old camcorder. Yeah. And I was actually, one of my buddies at work on a CNC machine turned a scope adapter to where I could hook up the camcorder to actually film. Yeah. And it was one of those old camcorders where it had the display folded out, right? So you're not looking through the eyepiece. Yep. And I had that thing on a Harris bipod. I was actually aiming and shooting, sitting down, pulling the trigger, but looking at the viewfinder.
Yeah, you're like this. You're holding the gun out here, like not even in your shoulder.
Yeah, not even like right on my shoulder. Yeah. And I put like 5 shots into like a 3/8 inch group at 70 yards. And you could literally, you know, because the PCPs, there's hardly any recoil. Well, on the smaller calibers, you could actually see the pellets, you know, in slow motion, you know, arcing into the target. Yep. And when I'd seen that, I was like, man, what's the deal? Why are these so stupid, you know, just consistent?
Yep.
You know, and that just blows me away how I just picked up one of those Garmin Zero C1 chronographs, you know, and it goes down to tenths of feet per second. And I was shooting the other day and I just cannot believe, like my youngest boy has an airsoft rifle, like a decent one.
Yep.
And just the consistency was just blowing me away. I just could not believe how low the extreme spreads and the standard deviations are.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, you know, like I think there's started to be a crossover a little bit between kind of the rimfire world and the airgun world. And, and you see a lot of rimfire guys getting into air guns because of some of these larger competitions like the Pyramyd Air Cup that we host, like the Rocky Mountain Airgun Challenge and things like that. you know, they're interested because there's prize money on the line and it's another competitive venue, right? And they get their hands on an air gun and they're like, whoa, like my rimfire doesn't do this, right?
Right.
And you run a regulated air gun over the chronograph and you're getting 60, 70 shots with a sub 15 foot per second extreme spread over the course of all of them, right?
Right. And those guys that are buying the 22 ammo are spending, you know, like, because I know a little about 22 ammo.
Yeah.
Dude, you're spending like freaking, you know, a bunch of money just for like good ammo.
Yeah, they're not buying the, you know, $9.99 brick of CCI or something. They're buying like good stuff, you know, and
right.
So it's very interesting to see people that are like pure firearm shooters sit down behind an air gun and go, wow, that's accurate. Wow, that has a nice trigger. And this costs how much, you know?
Right.
And then even further, right, they get their hands on a really expensive air gun, like a Rapid Air Weapons or an FX or something. And they're like, you know?
Yeah.
So it's really cool to see that kind of evolution. And the market's in a better place than it's ever been to have that conversation with the firearm side of the shooting world, right? There's more options out there. There's crossover of features now. We have aftermarket companies making chassis for air guns, right? With ARCA mounts, and like it's a legitimate trainer all of a sudden, right? For a lot of these guys. And then they realize, oh my gosh, this thing's quiet too. I can shoot this in my backyard. I can pop pest birds at the local farm or whatever. You know, there's so many opportunities that bringing out a firearm maybe doesn't fit that an air gun is perfect for.
Right.
And so you're catching a lot of these people that have either seen it on YouTube, been to a competition, met somebody at their local range that was shooting one, and it kind of opens their eyes to a whole new world, which is really cool.
Which reminds me, don't forget, so are you guys definitely going to have your Pyramyd Air Cup again at the, is that the Cardinal Shooting Sports in Marengo?
Yep, we hosted at the Cardinal Shooting Center. The dates haven't been announced yet, but probably we have a website specifically for the event, pyramydaircup.com. Check that out. The dates will probably be posted in early February.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll be covering that as a media. Yeah, definitely. Looks very, I watched the video from last year. I forget who covered it. But yeah, that looks pretty awesome.
It's a great time, and you get to meet a lot of like-minded individuals. We have demo ranges for a lot of our vendors, so you can go try stuff that you'd either never be able to afford or you're never going to get your hands on unless you spend a lot of money, you know? So there's a lot of cool stuff there. There's, you know, raffles, giveaways, all sorts of cool stuff.
So let me ask you this, Tyler, as far as, what would you recommend? Like, let's say somebody new to my channel or a regular subscriber, what would be a good gateway PCP air rifle to get somebody in?
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple of them. And that's actually one of the areas of the industry we've seen the most growth in. And I don't believe we're done seeing growth in that category. So the Gauntlet was a great gun. The Umarex has come out with the Gauntlet 2, now a side lever version, which is much more user-friendly. That's a great option. I love that. If you are looking for something that has the capability to go into maybe like a medium-sized game situation, like a coyote-sized game, that's what you want to do with it. Their 30 caliber Gauntlet SL is a great option. The other gun that's really dominated over the last couple of years is the Air Venturi Avenger. There's a couple different versions. They have a bullpup. There's a synthetic stock, a wood stock. We even, for the holidays, we had like laminate stocks that they came out with for it. So there's a whole bunch of different options there, and that's fully adjustable for power, up to 25 caliber. So that's also kind of, you know, if you were closer range, let's say sub 50 yards, medium game capable as well. You have a couple other offerings. There's some new stuff coming since we're right ahead of SHOT Show, like SHOT Show's next week. If it's okay for me to date this.
Yeah, no worries. I was going to ask you about if you're going to SHOT Show, but go.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, there's a couple new things that I won't spill on just yet that are coming that'll be really cool in that kind of $300 to $400 price range as well. The other gun to look at would be like the JTS Aracuda. Nice gun for right about that $300 mark as well. Those would be my three picks, depending on exactly what you wanted.
Awesome. And then of course you because I've perused the Pyramyd Air website, and I got to commend you. Whoever did your website did an awesome job.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's very user friendly. You know, you can search. What I love is the search capability. You know, obviously you want to search in stock. You search by caliber. You can search by type.
Yep.
You know, all that. That's awesome. The what would you consider like the mid? Like I'm going probably $500 to $1,000. Let's say somebody's into it.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, because I did notice, I've been in the last 2 weeks, I've just like binge watched a bunch of videos like on the FX guns.
Yeah.
And it seems to me if somebody wants to step up, the next step up is like you alluded to earlier, as to where you actually have a what would you call that? Being able to adjust the regulator.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, like a fully adjustable PCP, which pretty much all of the FX guns are.
Right.
The problem for, I guess, a lot of folks with the FX guns is the price, right? That FX really starts at like the $1,000 mark and goes up from there. So if you were looking for that kind of gateway drug in between, right? You were looking for something that's better quality than those $300, $400 guns we just talked about. You know, that maybe has those same features. Really, the only thing out there right now is the Air Venturi Avengex, which is kind of like, so that came out last year. Air Venturi really like took their Avenger platform with the adjustable regulator and adjustable hammer spring and beefed it up and like put it on crack, you know, like it's caliber interchangeable. So if you buy it in a 22 and you decide you want a 25 later, you can swap that easily. It comes in a number of different stock styles, so that are all user swappable. So if you buy it as a tactical, right, you can switch it to a classic wood stock later if you decide to, or if you have a need where you're going to be shooting in a tighter space, right, or indoors, and you want to shrink the profile of the gun, you can turn it into a bullpup yourself. So that's really cool. It's got a ton of power adjustability behind it as well, but a much more solid build. And I think that the base model starts at $500, right? So the kind of tube version starts at 500, which is still pretty affordable in the grand scheme of the PCP market. But you can even swap the air cylinder out for a bottle, and you basically double your shot count immediately, which is kind of wild. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff you could do with it. It's kind of a Lego gun, if you will. And I know there's gonna be some more stuff at SHOT Show next week for the Avengex, so people should stay tuned on that, because there'll be some new items and styles shown for that gun.
Awesome. And then of course, then we'll segue to the 1000. Those are folks that have, you know, realize that PCPs are where it's at. So then now, well, before we even go there, so because I'll be honest with you, it wasn't until like 2 weeks ago did I start educating myself on why you even want to screw around with a regulated gun. Maybe talk about that, because now I know now because I've done my homework. But for the folks that don't know, why would you even want to mess with that?
Yeah, sure. So a regulator is a physical device inside of an air gun. Not all air guns, but regulated air guns. That basically you fill the gun to a preset pressure. So let's say the gun fills to 3,000 psi. The gun doesn't necessarily perform optimally at 3,000 psi. So in the case of an unregulated gun, you might actually fill it to 2,700 psi. Because between 2,700 and 2,000 psi, that's where the gun performs optimally. What a regulator does is it actually takes that 3,000 psi of pressure and drops it down to that 2,000 psi, let's say, where the gun performs optimally all the time. So you can fill it all the way to 3,000 and get those extra shots out of it much more consistently than you would with an unregulated gun. And often, go ahead.
I'm sorry. And that 2,000 or 2,200 or some videos I watch, they talk in bars, right?
Yep.
So that regulated pressure, is that actually in a different reservoir?
Yeah. So if you were to think about it, right, if this is my air cylinder here, right, and this is like my regulator sits right here, okay, and this is what we would call a plenum chamber, right. So the air comes from here through the regulator to a reduced pressure here. And it sits there until you fire it. And when you shoot it, right, that air goes behind the pellet and pushes it out the barrel.
Right. And I guess the second part of the equation is the hammer, what do they call it? The hammer.
So a lot of guns have a hammer spring adjustment as well. Hammer
spring, that's it.
The easiest way to think about this would be like a revolver, right, where you cock a hammer back. So when you pull a bolt action back or a side lever back, however you're doing that, it sets a physical weight inside of the gun onto that trigger sear, and that's what you're releasing when you pull the trigger. So that has a spring behind it to propel it forward. And a lot of these guns have an adjustable mechanism on the back of that spring, so you can adjust the preload or the tension on the spring, right? Because if you think about it, if you have the hammer hit the valve harder, it's going to open it further, which is going to allow more air to come through the valve. And if you reduce the pressure on that spring, you're going to hit it softer, right? And it's going to use less air, so lower power. So,
Right.
and with these adjustable guns, you have to find a balance between the regulator pressure and that hammer spring adjustment. So you're looking for, because you can throw an adjustable gun out of whack very easily. All right. There is a little bit of a science to it and a little bit of an experimentation element to it as well. But there's some general rules of thumb that when you really get into this stuff, you can go online on YouTube or on a forum and find this information very quickly. But basically you want to match kind of that hammer spring tension to whatever your reg's set at to achieve the kind of happy place, let's call it, for that setting. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff you could do with them. Like that Avengex, for example, you can go from shooting, let's say 20 foot-pounds. Okay. For the folks at home, that would be like the equivalent of, I don't know, like a 16 grain pellet at like, I want to say like somewhere in the 700 foot per second range.
Okay.
You can go from shooting that lighter weight projectile at a slower speed to cranking the gun up and shooting a 25 grain projectile at 900 feet a second. Right. So you can get almost 50 plus foot-pounds of energy out of that, where you were just getting like 20 or so. And it's only with a few relatively simple adjustments. Like it would take 5 to 10 minutes to kind of change that setup.
So that was a big, because me as an engineer, I'd be like, why even screw with it? And then I realized, well, because of that, because now you have the capability of shooting a huge range of pellet weights, not just pellet weights, but I also understand that folks are doing it because they may want to shoot slugs. Yeah. Which is a whole different animal in of itself.
Yep. Yeah. That's been an emerging part of the market over the last couple of years. A pellet, I think everybody kind of recognizes like a pellet as it looks like a shuttlecock in badminton, right? It's got, big flared skirt on the end. Anybody who's
hourglass.
Yeah. It's the term that's used in the industry is a diabolo, but that's not going to relate to people, right?
Right.
So the problem with a pellet traditionally is that when you start to stretch the distance, as a lot of these guns are capable of now, Nito, you could speak to this as well, right? When you and I got into this, 50 yards was a long way. Like was, if you could shoot a sub 1 inch group at 50 yards, that was a good gun. And now that standard has really changed to, you got to be like 3/4 of an inch or better at 50 yards for people to even consider it. And that's just in 10 years or so. And now you have folks shooting 1 inch groups at 100 yards,
which is insane.
It is, right?
You'd be hard pressed to find a 22 rifle rimfire to do that.
Yeah, honestly, for sure.
With the best ammo.
Yes. And people are doing that with pellets. And the interesting thing about a pellet is that a pellet is not spin stabilized like a bullet in flight. It is actually drag stabilized. And that's why the projectile is designed the way it is. But it's made for subsonic flight. The problem with that is it's way more susceptible to the wind. Mm-hmm. So the search for kind of a higher ballistic coefficient projectile started many, many years ago. And slugs were, I would say, got popularized maybe 3 to 4 years ago, truly. They were out there before them, but they didn't really start to catch on until manufacturers like FX started to build guns kind of around them. So when that conversation got started, you started seeing a lot of manufacturers get into that slug space, and it's a conical bullet, truly. Usually a hollow point expands very well. And the great thing is, because it's a higher BC projectile, you're carrying far more energy downrange than you do with a pellet. So it opened up a world of hunting possibilities for some of these like mid caliber guns, like 25 and 30. But it also really changed the distance conversation of what an air gun can do. You have guys stretching to 200-300 yards with 22, 25 caliber guns now, that with pellets, you could try it, but it's not going to be any fun, right? But with a slug, because of the kind of wind resistance capabilities of having that higher BC, you could you could kind of go out and shoot competitively at a NRL 22 match, and there are guys that do it.
Right.
So that's become a thing. Like in NRL and some of these other shooting organizations have started their own airgun divisions because they see this as an emerging trend, which is really encouraging.
Awesome. So let's kind of segue to the one thing I've never gone into, like, is the big bore, you know.
Sure.
And you know, we're both in Ohio, and I'm a deer hunter also. I wish Ohio would change their laws, because I would love, you know, I've taken deer with about every type of legal weapon you can in Ohio. But yeah, I would love to hunt with an air rifle. That'd be awesome.
Me too. Yeah, it's being worked on. I'll say that for Ohio anyway.
Good.
But yeah, there are about 24 states right now that have some type of big game provision for air rifle hunting on their regs right now. So, you know, and that can vary by state, right? Like there are states like Arizona where you can hunt just about anything, any of their big game species with an air gun, which is really cool. And then you have other states that just have whitetail regulations. You know, they don't really allow you to use an air rifle for any other type of game necessarily, or big game. But in general, right, like big bore air guns have like the inexpensive PCPs, big bore PCPs have really also been a focus for the industry over the last couple of years. So you have guns that are starting at like the $700 price point or so that produce right around 300 foot-pounds. So to real world that for folks, like a 200 grain projectile at 800 feet a second, I think, if my math's right on that, is about the same. Yeah, about the same power level as like maybe like a 9mm or something, maybe a 45, 40 cal, somewhere in that ballpark, right? It's about the same energy level as your common carry handgun.
Right.
But going up from there, like that's the entry point. So we have big bore air guns like the Air Force Texan, for example, or the Umarex Hammer that are in the 700 to 800 foot-pound range. So now you're talking about, you know, double the weight of the projectile, a 400 grain projectile going 800 or 900 feet a second. So these things produce monstrous power and are able to take down pretty much any game out there. We've had folks. And then you add the secondary component of like some of these guns, like the Seneca Dragonclaw, for example, are capable of shooting not only a slug, but also an arrow out of the gun.
Right.
So you could shoot a 400 plus grain arrow at like 600 feet a second. Nothing stops this. All right. We've had guys go to Africa and take Cape Buffalo with them, and it's just like in one end out the other, like does not stop to say hello. And that thing, you know, that thing goes down 30 yards away because you got, you know, you throw a big broadhead on it and there's nothing that's going to stop it. So the capabilities are insane. Like I've taken a red stag. Well, it was a red deer hind is the appropriate thing, a female, a couple of years ago with one. It's an incredible thing, right? That air can do all of that.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah, you know, it's kind of interesting because let's go back to when we were growing up shooting quote BB guns. You know, you would never, and this is kind of a good talking point I think we should talk about, is this is definitely not your daddy's or your granddaddy's BB gun.
Yeah,
I mean these are very lethal. You know, even the 22s, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, I've got some upcoming videos playing. I've got a high-speed slow motion video camera. And if you go on my channel, I do a bunch of high-speed, slow motion shots into ballistic gel, right? Even a 22, my disco was getting, you know, 8-10 inches of penetration in gel.
Oh yeah.
So that will tell you the lethality, you know, let alone some of these bigger, you know, PCPs.
Absolutely,
no doubt.
Yeah, you definitely have to treat them with the very same respect you would treat a firearm. And that goes not only for your own safety, but the safety of those around you, or maybe those that aren't aware you're shooting in your backyard, right? Like you still need a good quality pellet trap or even a bullet trap, right? Like a lot of folks use a 22 rimfire trap, you know, because you're talking about, look, most people don't know the numbers behind this. So like the average 22 rimfire is putting out about 100 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle,
right?
Give or take, depending on the ammo. an air gun, a 22 caliber air gun like your Discovery is topping out around 30 foot-pounds of energy, but 30 foot-pounds is still plenty for small game, you know, or to potentially hurt somebody, you know, in a life-threatening way. And quite frankly, a lot less power than that can kill.
Oh yeah.
And so we 100% preach the same things that you would see at any firearms range, right? In terms of safety standards, because you know, yes, you can go from those lower powered BB guns that seem harmless, all the way up to these 50 caliber monstrous big bore air guns that, like I said, can take the biggest game in the world. So the air guns really span like this huge broad range of capabilities, but all of them need to be respected in the same manner, because
100%.
accidents happen and you need to take precautions to make sure they don't.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know, it's an exciting time for air rifles, as you can, you know, like I said, just, you know, it wasn't sustainable for me because, you know, the irony is air should be free, right?
Yeah.
You know, that was the irony. Is like, well, you know, because I worked with Umrex on my channel for a little bit, you know,
Sure.
and I probably said, well, you know, it's not sustainable. I mean, I can't justify driving 2 hours round trip, you know, to get, you know, 100 shots, right? Because that's what it's pretty much amounting to.
Absolutely.
You know, and now I think if folks realize that now the air compressors have come down, and let's talk a little bit about that, because that's something that I did do some research on.
Yeah.
Like, let's say 5 years ago, when these air compressors started to be somewhat economical, right? Yep. Guys were having problems with the seals, correct? And they were misusing or abusing
some
them,
models.
so
Yeah, some models, right? Like, so the compressors that came out, the personal use compressors, like, we gotta have to separate it, right? There's the big compressors that fill your tanks,
right?
And then like those personal use compressors, like portable compressors, if you will. Those compressors, yeah, a lot of folks were trying to fill their small carbon tanks off them, and those compressors are largely still made to run for like 15 minutes at a time.
Max,
yeah. Like,
right.
That's all I would run one for.
Right.
Now you could run one and fill one of those tanks and go 15 minutes on, 15 minutes off, 15 minutes on, and you're going to slowly fill it, right? Like, yes, you could do that. But that continued use, guys were just letting these things run for a half hour. And yeah, you're going to burn them out. They're not made to run that long, or they weren't made to run that long. There are some that kind of span that gap. There's a compressor by Hill, which is a UK manufacturer that was made originally for guns, but has built-in features like it stops and starts itself if it runs for too long. So it will stop, cool down, and restart itself. So that's a nice thing if you're looking to kind of do both things with a compressor, right? But yeah, the personal use compressors that are out there now, I personally never recommend running them more than 15 minutes at a time. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not capable of it, but that's just you want to keep that thing running for as long as you possibly can. So that's the best way to do it, is just to keep an eye on how long it's going for.
Now, are the compressors, like the personal use, are those what, I guess, I mean, these are relevant questions, right? Are they user serviceable as far as, can you replace O-rings or seals, or I'm not sure. I'm asking you.
Yeah.
People are going to ask that question. How, you know, if I spend $500, you know, Pyramyd Air for a PCP compressor.
Yep.
You know, what would you prescribe to somebody to get spare parts, or, you know, whatever?
Oh, sure. So most of the compressors come with like a parts kit or a reseal kit, just as a default, right? But we sell, at least for any of the products that have like US representation, right? I can't help you for something you bought on eBay, right? Or maybe I can, I just don't know it, because there's so many out there that I don't know what's compatible with what in that case. But like for Air Venturi or like Umrex compressors, any of the stuff that we sell, we have parts kits for, in large part. So, and we even still service compressors that were like discontinued a couple of years ago. So like the original Air Venturi Nomad that's been discontinued since like 2019 or so, we still service those, and we have all the parts for them that you might need. So that's not really huge deal or shouldn't be a huge concern, I suppose, because you could buy rebuild kits up front if you want. If you want to have those spare parts on hand, and you do have to have a little bit of mechanical know-how. I will say that it's not, they're high pressure devices. They're not made to be the easiest to understand and service, right? They are made to work in a certain way. So you do have to kind of understand what you're taking apart as you're taking things apart. But yeah, like they could certainly be user serviced. Absolutely.
So do you guys offer, let's say somebody that's not an engineer like myself,
Sure,
but it really wants to get into this game. Do you guys offer that as a service, you say?
yeah. So we repair all of them. Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's good to know. I mean, because the guy, person goes out and spends $500-$600 on an item. They hope it lasts, of course it goes back to, like you said, you can't abuse these, I mean, you can't, right? You got to use them as they're intended.
Yeah, it's the same thing with I think any kind of user appliance, right? Like if you depending on your use, kind of determines your expectation of a lifespan. But what I will say is what most people don't realize, I think, is that your example was a good one. It didn't make sense for you to fill up the gun once, go to the range and shoot 100 times, right? Because you want to have a longer range session. But like if you're not a range shooter or your range is your backyard, it's perfectly fine for you to shoot that 100 times, go inside, fill the gun, come back out, right?
Right.
It's the travel part. So but like even hunting, if you were to take an air gun small game hunting, most of these air guns, like your Gauntlet, for example, it was 60, 70 shots on a fill on the regulator. So you're not going to shoot 60 or 70 squirrels. No, it's not, even if it was possible.
Well, you're not allowed to either.
Yeah, right. So I think people have a bit of a misconception when it comes to like how much they will actually need it. Right.
Right.
And they think, oh, I'm going to be filling my air gun once a day. And it's like, will you really? Right. Because for a lot of folks, it's like, I want to run a magazine through my gun when I get home from work after a stressful day, do a little group therapy, if you will, throw some shots downrange. Or they're going to set the gun in the corner and there's a squirrel in the backyard. They pull it up, smoke it, and then, put the gun down until the next squirrel comes around. The actual practical use of this is not like, it's not every day. And there are some guys, I'm sure, that use them every day, but it's probably not the majority. Right.
Right.
So, in those kind of instances where you're filling the gun a couple times a month, once a week, the compressor should last you a very, very long time.
Right. Awesome. So, all right. So let's kind of segue to, are you going to SHOT Show next week?
Yes. Yeah. I'll be there for a couple days. Should be interesting this year.
Yeah. I covered that for about 5 years on my YouTube channel. And then my title sponsor, he sold his company and then kind of, there went my free ride.
I got you. Sure.
That's an expensive trip, Yeah. I mean, it's like, depending on where you stay at, but I mean, that's a pretty pricey trip. I mean, Vegas ain't cheap, right?
Yeah, well, that's the problem, and that whole town is built around knowing when these shows happen. So,
they probably
go,
inflate their prices.
Oh my gosh, yeah, like you book like we if I come in on a Sunday, right? That Sunday price, it's like $79, and you're like, oh man, this is great. And then the Monday price when the show starts is like $200, and you're like, whoa,
right? Supply and demand.
Yes,
absolutely. So we would actually stay at the what was it, the Palazzo?
Yeah,
I mean, we were staying at like $1,500 a night suites.
Yeah, that's nice.
So it was nice. I mean, so now for me to out of pocket to cover all that is like, man.
I get it. I totally get it.
Where do you guys stay on the strip, or do you stay off the strip?
Yeah, we have like folks that stay in different places. Like I'm staying at the Paris this year, which is a little bit of a walk, but in the morning that's a nice walk actually.
Yeah. Or you could do. I mean, Uber's so cheap these days,
Oh sure, yeah. It honestly, like I like usually this time of year in Vegas, it's a little cooler in the mornings. So like here in Ohio, as it's like 0 degrees outside.
Oh yeah.
So, I will take 55 in the morning every day.
Oh yeah, absolutely. you could tell who the Northerners are and the Southerners.
Yes, exactly.
You get off, you fly into McCarran Airport, and like we're coming from Sub-Zero to it could be 75 next week there.
Yeah. Yeah. You never know.
Easily.
Yep.
So where do you guys, that's kind of like I said, I covered SHOT Show for like 5 years, and last one I went to was 2020.
Okay.
And so where do you guys have a booth, or you guys just walk,
yeah, so Pyramyd Air doesn't have a booth because we're a retailer, right? Like,
okay.
and we meet with a lot of our manufacturing partners that are there.
Okay, right.
So like Air Venturi's there, Crossman should be there, Umarex, Hatsan. Yep. You have a lot of overseas manufacturers, or like Zisico, JTS. They're there as well with a booth. Some of our optics, companies that we work with, right?
Oh,
so there's all sorts of companies that we meet with. Like SHOT Show's kind of your yearly time to do kind of a recap on, hey, here's how the year went. Here's what the new stuff is coming. Do you think this is going to be a good seller for you? Do you want to get some on order now? Those are the conversations you're having. And it's also a good opportunity to, check out some new companies, because SHOT Show's so big. You get, companies from other parts of the world, whether it's Asia or Turkey, or even like the UK. You get sometimes these new manufacturers that buy a booth at SHOT Show because they have a cool air gun that they want to show off and need to find somebody to import it for them. And so those are the things we're looking for when we're there.
Are you going to be covering, because I know you host, what's your YouTube channel?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So on the Pyramyd Air YouTube channel, my video series is called the Pyramyd Insider. Yeah.
Pyramyd Insider. And I'll be sure to put the links in this video description as well. So do you cover any, or do you get a media pass, or are you a vendor, or what kind of pass?
I get a vendor pass, I suppose.
Right.
I've never looked.
Yeah, but they don't, like back in the day when I used to cover, I always had a big, camera rig or whatever.
Yeah.
But heck, these phones today, heck, you can just whip out your phone and
Yeah. It was crazy actually. Last year was kind of interesting because we had folks come up to film stuff with us, and they were like on a cell phone in like a gimbal, and they'd like clip on a little mic here that was wireless and like had a little rig up to the camera. And I'm like, is this a thing? Like, this is cool. I've never seen this stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it's a lot less to carry too.
Yeah. Oh, heck yeah. So last year we filmed a lot. This year, probably not so much. I'll probably post on social media, like on our Instagram. I do a lot of stuff on Instagram. So yeah, I'll probably post most of like the new gun pictures and things like that as they're coming out, maybe do some quick videos at booths and stuff like that. But you probably won't see much on our YouTube channel this year, because the reality is like, you don't know when a gun gets announced at SHOT Show. Sometimes the manufacturers have a tendency to underestimate the time to market, right? So they're like, we'll have this out in stores in 2 months, and you're like 5 months later going, where is it? So it's fine to talk about the product, but we also, because of the fact that we sell it all, right? I get to touch it and feel it all anyway. So we can film a review on anything, and I much prefer to do that kind of more in-depth look, right, at the features and spec overviews and performance testing and all that stuff, more so than, hey, tell me about how amazing this product is, and everybody's going to tell me it's amazing. Right. Let's find out, right? Or or if it's something that is just a concept and you're showing it to see if there's interest, right? Because sometimes you get that and you don't know it at the time. So you talk about something on YouTube that's there forever, and people are like, hey, like 3 years later, we still get comments on old videos. People are like, "What did this ever come out?" Yeah, right.
Yeah. It's kind of like the yeet cannon.
Yes. Yeah.
I work with High Point. And they 3 years later, So, but anyways, that's cool. So, you got anything else, Tyler?
Oh, well, all I will say is that, like I said in the beginning, we are expanding into a bunch of new categories. So I would be hard pressed to think very soon anyway, that whether it's archery related, hunting related, shooting related in general, you will probably be able to find it on our website. I think we may stop short at firearms, but ammo, uppers, like parts, all those kinds of things, probably things that you will see at some point in the future. So if you're interested in those things and you're not an air gunner, or you want to get into air guns and you also need to buy some new arrows for your bow, a new release, whatever. Like we've got most of those things. So yeah, not just an air gun company anymore.
Right. Awesome. So would you be open to like I Googled mapped you guys. You're only like an hour and a half south or north of me.
Yeah, we shouldn't be too far off. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you open to do a factory tour, or do you guys do that? Or
I think we could make that happen for you.
Awesome.
Sure.
I'll bring my high-speed camera. We'll do some slow motion video if you want to do that.
There you go. Yeah, we've got a 45-yard range on site, so we could definitely do some. The lighting's a little rough for high speed, if I'm being honest with you. We've tried this before, so yeah, but we'll make it work. We've got enough separate lights. I'm sure we could do some cool stuff.
And definitely, I'll see you guys at the Pyramyd Air Cup. Awesome. I mean, that's down in my neck. Marengo's only like 35 minutes from my house.
Yeah, it shouldn't be too far from you. Yeah. Awesome.
All right, Tyler. Well, listen, thank you, man. Safe travels next week. Appreciate and don't get that crud, man. Just, keep your hands sanitized. And I got sick one time in Vegas from the SHOT Show crud.
Yep.
It's the worst.
7 or 8 years of this, I think I've gotten sick a couple of times. So hopefully this year I won't, but we'll see.
Right.
But appreciate you having me, man. Thank you very much.
Awesome. So this Nita with AP 2020 Outdoors. Remember, support that Second Amendment. We'll see you later. And I thank you.